Tattered flags waving, dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
What's going on, guys? Good evening. It is Tuesday, and it's time for everybody's favorite biggest little small soccer podcast on the internet. It is Stateside Footy, and tonight we are talking World Cup groups, diving a little bit into Group D, the U.S. men's national team, and it's going to be exciting. Go ahead and hit your like and subscribe buttons. And also make sure you hit the notification bell so you do not miss out on any of the upcoming stuff we're doing this weekend, because it's going to be fabulous. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Tonight, there is your groups. And, of course, last Friday here on Stateside Footy, as I welcome Jeff Lageson from Prost International as we weeded through one of the worst 2-hour experiences in my life. By the way, I don't think I'm ever doing that again. I understand it's a U.S. World Cup and they wanted to put on a show, but, you know, when Wayne Gretzky can't pronounce countries and you got Shaq and Tom Brady and it's like, dude, just get to the goddamn draw. All right, enough about that. Let's go ahead and get into it because obviously expanded field. We're going to 48 teams, and 48 teams means no group of death. Which is actually kind of takes away from it a little bit because, you know, with the group of death, obviously there's built-in storylines. Who's going to be able to battle their way out of it. I always enjoyed it. And of course, the U.S. had been a part of a few groups of death in our illustrious World Cup history. But that being said, let's see with Nateski, what's up, buddy? RIFCTID. All right. So the interesting thing about this is, that was the first thing that I noticed because of the expanded World Cup field is the fact that it seems like all the heavies got a relatively easy, smooth sail. And of course, obviously Spain with their, I guess you can say with their only relatively, simple test coming against Uruguay. And of course, Uruguay is a pretty good team, but obviously not in the same stratosphere as Spain. And of course, you get Cape Verde and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is okay. They're not great, but they're capable of kind of beating you on any given day. And of course, we saw that in the 2022 World Cup opening game. I think they beat Argentina. So yes, they are capable of putting on good performances. The Netherlands looks like they actually have a pretty solid group as well too. Same thing with Argentina. Argentina probably just might have the easiest one with Algeria, Austria, and Jordan. But obviously tonight we're talking about the U.S. men's national team, of course, one of 3 host nations. And of course, of the 3 host nations, I would probably think that the United States potentially has the hardest of the 3 groups. I know some people will say, well, Mexico's got South Korea and Canada's got Switzerland. True. But that being said, as far as the United States is concerned, there is a potential banana skin in there. And of course, I'm talking about Turkey, however they want to be, classified as. And the interesting thing is, Turkey, a relatively decent UEFA team. And of course, I remember them at the last Euros doing actually incredibly well. And we were introduced to, a nice little 18-year-old center mid who now plays for Real Madrid. Speaking of Turkey, let's pull them up real quick. The United States actually hasn't necessarily played Turkey in quite a bit. The last time that they met Turkey in I guess you can say a major competition was in 2003 at the Confederation Cup when Turkey actually beat the US 2-1. And of course, we saw them this year in a Gold Cup send-off where we also lost 2-1 as well too. But that being said, the United States also has 2 wins against them coming in 2010 and 2014. And they drew them 1-1 back in 1991. So there is a little bit of relative history. 2 teams that are unknown, and that's what makes this a little bit of a banana skin for the United States. And when you look at that UEFA playoff C and you see Turkey and you see Slovakia, you see Romania and Kosovo, you don't necessarily get inspired for a Kosovo run through that one. So it kind of makes the group a little bit manageable. But that being said, it's like this is exactly the type of environment that I think that you want the U.S. To be in, because if they absolutely do get out of that group, or if they absolutely win that group, you would probably assume that they're probably going to be battle tested. The U.S., by the way, in this group versus Paraguay, and I want to pull this up as well too. They actually do have a nice little relative history against Paraguay. They've actually played them 9 times since 1930. And of course, we can't necessarily get into the post-1990 action, but they did beat them in the FIFA World Cup in 1930. As a matter of fact, I think it was the 1930 FIFA World Cup where the United States actually got their best result in the World Cup, which I believe they made it to the semifinals back in those days. But right now, we actually hold a 3-match win streak over Paraguay. And of course, we met them in Copa America 2016. We beat them 1-0. We have them in March of 2018, where we beat them 1-0 in international friendly, and we just recently beat them on November 15th. So there is a little bit of recent history. These two nations actually do know each other quite well. And from that standpoint, now, what does the recent history have anything to do with this one? Absolutely nothing. But there is some relative. There is some relatively known things about both of these nations. And they have faced each other over the course of the last couple of decades. And what I will say is that when it comes to these teams for Group D, one of the things that I keep hearing is the fact that we've seen potentially these 3 teams over the course of the year. That's certainly true. 2 of those we beat, and from that standpoint, you would probably think that having that in your back pocket, understanding exactly how they're going to play, well, that goes both ways. That absolutely goes both ways. When Mauricio Pochettino had his press conference last Friday after the draw, he was asked that one question, because there is familiarity with these teams. How is that going to affect your setup when you meet these teams in the World Cup? And he was quite candid by saying that it was nice that we were able to see them in 2025. But the reality is the scouting, begins, because there's going to be different wrinkles that we're going to see, different players that maybe didn't get called up or were injured, that completely shake the balance of exactly how these teams are going to play. And it goes both ways for these teams with the United States. If you don't think that these teams are scouting the United States, scouring Europe, watching players, some of these other things, it goes both ways. And that's why this is a little bit of a tricky group, even for a team like Australia, where obviously not the biggest, not the biggest powerhouse in the Asian Confederation. But that being said, it's like, going through the Asia Cup, yeah, there might be some opportunity to be a little bit battle tested there. Now, certainly, you would probably think that they would be the worst team in the group. But that being said, it's like I don't look at any of these teams as as an easy cakewalk, and I sure as hope that Mauricio Pochettino doesn't look at this as well too. For the United States, obviously, for me, the biggest thing is going to be injuries. How we're going to be able to navigate this group and potentially, pull points out of this group is going to depend on the depth of this group, and of course, a guy like me that does a weekly show charting players in Europe. I can tell you that there are certain position groups that are better than others. I know exactly where the firepower on this team lies, and there is going to be a big referendum that's going to be on defense, because right now one of our wing backs is currently out. The backup to that wing back plays in Major League Soccer. And then beyond that, it's who knows. And then, you're wondering about whether Timmy Weah kind of falls into this camp as well too. And so from that standpoint, this is going to be the outlier for Group D, is going to be health and depth, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because the one thing that both Paraguay and Turkey are going to offer on top of pace and physicality is their ability to move the ball in our zone. And one of the things that the United States has not been good at this entire 2025, except relatively the last couple months, is being able to slow opponents from absolutely slicing through their midfield. So from that standpoint, that's why I look at Group D and I say, yeah, there's going to be some moments where I don't know. And especially if that playoff C winner is going to be Turkey, I sure as hell don't know how this thing is going to play out. Because from that standpoint, I don't even know who the best team in the group is. And I'm not saying that to be a dick, but there's going to be 4 different factors that potentially could see the United States winning the group, and then also the United States barely struggling to be third in the group. And that is the thing with this group that has me a little freaked out about this. But from that standpoint, as of right now, you're hoping that what we saw in the last 2 windows, coming into the World Cup year, playing good football, kind of rounding into form, and when you see some of our best players in Europe, looks like they're starting to come into form too, it kind of makes you feel a little bit better. But again, one of the things that since Mauricio Pochettino's taken out is the lack of time that he's had with the guys that we expect to be in the World Cup. He's had more time with the domestic-based player, far more time with the domestic-based players than he has with European-based players. And so from that standpoint, man, I guess one of the things that I look at is whether or not he has the ability to round this group into form and get this team actually pointed in the right direction prior to the World Cup. Because when you look at the schedule, the next window, Germany and Portugal are, Portugal, is it Portugal and Belgium, and then Germany is going to be a part of the send-off games. Going into it, that's a rough go, man. That's a rough go. That's there's going to be a lot of the learning curve for this team, and you wonder what that mentality is going to look like when this thing kicks off in June against Paraguay down in Los Angeles. But that being said, I don't like the idea of Turkey in my group. That is for me the outlier, because Paraguay kind of already shakes me up a little bit. And what we saw from Paraguay in November is not going to be the same team we see in June. 100%. Like, the one team that might look the same is going to be Australia, but Australia is going to give you a game. They're going to play hard. But it's going to be that outlier from UEFA playoff C that may or may not determine whether, may or may not determine whether we finish in spots 1 or 3. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I did want to talk a little bit about Group A and Group B. Now, one of the things that Mexico has is the fact that they're going to be playing in Mexico. And I think there is something to it because over the years, playing at Aztec Stadium, playing at Estadio Azteca, or playing in Guadalajara, that type of home environment is historically been a fortress for El Tri. And we have seen good teams go in to a place like Estadio Azteca in an environment that, number one, they can't handle the elevation, and number two, they can't handle the fans. Mexico teams that probably weren't as good as previous editions of El Tri, and still Mexico coming away with a result. And the thing about this is if you ask me right now, is South Korea better than Mexico? 100%. But throw that out the window, because again, I don't think that team has ever played at an elevation, quite like Estadio Azteca. And so from that standpoint, I had to retract something, because it is true that this is the worst edition of El Tri that I've seen in 25 years for a number of factors in Mexico. And it starts, I guess at the top right there with their Mexican Federation being corrupt, but also it's, for allowing, the corruption of the Mexican First Division. 3 ownership groups own the entire league. There's no more promotion and relegation. They don't put money in scouting. They don't put money in player development. And because of it, their national team is dog shit. They got some decent players, but overall, they're not producing the players that, I saw growing up in the 90s and, the 80s and the 90s. Like, so those were some of the best El Tri versions of El Tri. But over the course of the last 5 years, this has been kind of bad. But it goes out the window when it comes to the World Cup, because they're playing at home. They're playing at home. And so from that standpoint, when I look at this group, there's a good chance that Mexico potentially wins their group. And it wouldn't surprise me, just because they, it's a difference between Mexico playing in the United States versus Mexico playing in Mexico. It's a completely different situation. And from that standpoint, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, they got a better group for their home environment than we do with ours. 100%. Canada is something completely different, man. I want Canada to do well. I really do. That team has earned the right to be there. And over the course of the last 10 years, they have pulled their national team up off the ground floor to do some really nice things over the course of the last 10 years. But Switzerland is going to batter them. And the winner coming off of that UEFA playoff A, and they're going to be playing in Canada, but I guess the only team that they're going to probably be able to get points off is probably going to be Qatar. From that standpoint, that's the way that it's looking. But it is what it is, man. I just look at this and relative to the home environment and where the team is going to be playing, Mexico has a better opportunity to win the group than the United States. I hope I'm fucking wrong. And I apologize for swearing. I hope I'm wrong. But the banana skin for the United States is going to be that opening match against Paraguay. For a lot of reasons. Because we just beat Paraguay. And you would probably assume that's in the back of their mind. And this is an opportunity to pile on from Copa. Now there's, there again, a lot of things have to go right for them in order to do this. So it's not necessarily on Paraguay as it is the United States. It's 100% on the United States. But again, man, that one, that playoff, I'm telling you, man, that playoff seed from UEFA scares the shit out of me just because of Turkey. And I've seen Turkey do some really good things in the Euros. That young kid, man, from Real Madrid, Arda Güler, unbelievably talented dude. All right. Let's go through this. Let's start with Group C because, again, Brazil getting a little bit, I wouldn't say getting preferential treatment because they get Morocco. And Morocco is going to be that team. And again, it's an AFCON team. And man, is that going to be tough. That team, from the senior national team all the way down to the youth teams, that national team is absolutely humming. Morocco is a team that I would do it seriously. I'm glad they're not my group. That is currently ranked number 22 by ELO. By the way, Turkey, for those that are wondering, ranked 15th in the ELO. Paraguay ranked 21st. So Morocco is right behind Paraguay. But Morocco is a team that from top to bottom, they're doing things right. Now, on second thought, on recollection, this actually might be Scotland's saving grace because they do have Haiti. Haiti, by the way, congratulations to Haiti, another CONCACAF entry. Congratulations. We saw Haiti at the Gold Cup, and of course we beat them with our domestic-based players. For Scotland, that's their own saving grace because Scotland is good enough to beat Haiti, and I think third place teams are going to be able to come out of this thing. And so, from that standpoint, this is Scotland's first World Cup in a very, very, very long time. It was a very emotional, passionate qualifying round for them, and so from that standpoint, having Haiti in their group is their saving grace because it might allow them, to sneak out of that group as a third place team. But the two teams at the top of this one, Morocco, Brazil, those two teams are going to just absolutely batter each other, and it wouldn't surprise me if Morocco pulled up an upset and beat Brazil. Germany in Group E, their only test is going to be Ecuador, and Ecuador is a great team. I think they conceded the fewest amount of goals in CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying. They get the Ivory Coast, which is not the same Ivory Coast coming out of AFCON as it was in the 90s. Not those type of players that are developing anymore. Not a bad team, also just not a great team. And from that standpoint, you would probably think that it's going to be those two teams top in the group. And of course you have Curacao. And who knows how Curacao is going to show up. But from that standpoint, that's probably the easiest group of them all. If you're in Germany, you're happy as hell. Same thing with Netherlands, although you do have Japan, and Japan is going to be a thorn in anybody's side. But you kind of like the Netherlands as well too. Overall, when I look at the group play, it pays to be a UEFA. It pays to be a UEFA side because you're given preferential treatment, and the home nations not so much. But if the US does happen to handle their business, man, they're not going to. I don't think they're going to face. I think they face the winner of no, the second place of Group, I want to say Group E, if I've read that right. So that could possibly be Ecuador. And then, of course, then you don't face anybody that's, essentially from UEFA until the round of 16. So from that standpoint, there is a good opportunity for this team to do something special. But again, there's a multitude of things that have to go right between now and then. But again, when I look at Group D overall, there are points there. There are points there. And that being said, 6 points wins you the group. Is there 2 wins? I think most people have already circled Australia as one of those wins. And certainly it's going to help if somebody else but Turkey advances into it. That would be the most ideal. That would be literally the most ideal. But if it's Turkey, man, and trying to find a win between Paraguay and Turkey, that thing is going to be, you kind of almost wish, you had the 2022 group. England, Wales, and Iraq. Yeah, for sure. But it's going to be interesting, right? So the combination is going to be which of the 53 caps that Mauricio Pochettino gave this year, which of those are going to push themselves to the forefront. That was actually kind of nice when you really take a step back and you kind of look at exactly what happened this year and what he was using his time. And all of that was preparation to make sure that, essentially spots 20 through 26, the back end of the roster, that he knows he has players that he can trust. And I think he does. When you look at the Diego Lunas, the Alex Freemans, potentially even a Joe Scally, Max Arston, those guys, yeah, for sure. For sure. Maybe even a Christian Roldan. I still think he makes the team, by the way. But that's going to do it for me, guys. I'm going to take off. I just wanted to go over these groups, give you my opinion of it. But by the way, before I go, make sure you guys do hit the like and subscribe buttons, and also hit the notification bell. Again, I guess just to recap real quick, I do think that Group D is going to be a little bit of a difficult test for the U.S. men's national team, simply because there is 3 points in Australia. 100% there's 3 points. But this group is probably going to be a 6 or 7 point type of group in order to win it. And for the United States, they absolutely have to win it because I think I read this just a couple days ago that they play the second place of Group E, which I believe would be Ecuador. If things shook out that way. So, their round of, their first knockout round is going to be relatively challenging, but not so challenging where, they're not going to be able to advance. So it is imperative for this group to win it. And of course, we'll be covering everything U.S. men's national team between now and, of course, when the roster is announced, and of course the World Cup as well too. Take care, guys. Good night.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.